Hey folks, this is Matt Chat and this is my plywood canoe building adventure. It was supposed to be a cheap 2-week project, but instead it took a couple of months. I ended up building 2 canoes, built a canoe carrying dolly, a boat rack for my truck, and a hanging system for canoe storage. I made tons of mistakes and probably would have given up if it weren't for the money I had already spent. It became an amazing adventure, all for a canoe I wasn't sure I was going to use. Good morning. Time to check the glue. Let's see how solid it is. Let's take off the weights. Let's pull it out and raise it up. Let's see how well the wax paper comes off. Look at that. You can't imagine how bad it is when it's all glued up. Well, just moving it around right now. It's still only about 12 hours or so since I put this on. And the full drying time of this glue is up to 36 hours. So it's solid, but you don't want to put it into undue stress for at least a couple of days. But anyways, this is now like one piece. And just with the butt joints. This is way better than the other process I had to do. Before, when I did my pieces, if you take a look at that one over here, I glued on some wooden pieces. Now I still plan on doing that, but that was the first step I did, and my butt joints weren't done this way. I just dropped in a lot of epoxy in there and it just dribbled out, and it's very inefficient. And clamping those pieces down was a real problem because the pieces are always sort of moving a little bit. You know, they're a little higher, a little lower than each other. And it is very hard to clamp the plywood down. But now that the pieces are glued together, it's going to be solid enough for me to come in and put on my piece here without any difficulty. So I'm very happy with this. Time to check the next one. I don't know if you can see the length of it from this angle, but this is one long piece of wood. 15 feet, that tells you the length of the canoe. This is going to be a big canoe. So here all I did was clamp the pieces down to the table just to make sure they didn't move. The biggest problem was to make the alignment of the 2 pieces proper so that the angle was consistent. Most important and very difficult. But the person who designed the plans originally designed it in a way that these cuts here, which are in some cases the end of the plywood, the angles are already correct. So very good planning on the part of the designer of this canoe project. Alright, so let's take these off. This one was much simpler to do than the other one. Just a single section right here. Alright, let's get all this out of the way. And let's see if it glued. It did. Ta-da! And this very spot, when I did the last glue up, the piece over there, underneath I had a plank and it glued right to the wood, and I ripped it off and the entire surface of the plank stayed on my plywood, and I had to use the belt sander to sand it off. Yay for the wax paper. Yay for that. Great lesson to learn there. Next step is going to be some sanding. I want to do more glue up, but it makes more sense to do the glue ups at the end of the day to let it dry overnight, because once I've started gluing something, I can't touch it anymore for at least 12 hours. And that means you can't do anything in the shop. So I don't want to waste my day doing that. So I'm going to do as much sanding and preparation as I can, getting myself ready for a glue up at the end of the day. And I'll do that for 2 or 3 days, and it should all be done by the end. So on to sanding. Well, good morning again. So more things are happening here that are getting a bit frustrating along the way. I guess the first thing I'm going to talk about is corollary stuff dealing with making a canoe. As I make the canoe, people are telling me things, particularly about going on the water without a safety kit, a boating safety kit, and a flotation device, a life jacket. But if you don't have your safety kit, if you're missing a single item from your safety kit, you will end up having a $200 fine. I need to get a safety kit. So yesterday I found on Kijiji an ad for a safety kit being sold for $7. I decided to try to go get that. I went out to the person's place. The person wasn't there. The item wasn't there. So I wasn't able to purchase it. Somewhat frustrating. But along the way, I realized that the rules for the safety kit are quite complicated. And there are different rules for different boats, different motors, different situations. And you can easily get caught out without having the proper items on the boat. But it just seems like a warning to me to be very, very careful here. In particular, when I was reading this, they talk about navigation markers. And navigation markers, basically what they're saying is if you're in a boat that is 6 meters or less, and you're within sight of navigation markers, you do not need to have a magnetic compass with you. I just don't like that word, navigation markers. It's not clear to me. It reeks of a word that has a particular definition for a particular purpose here. I went online and looked for the definition of navigation markers, and they're talking about buoys and man-made items that are floating in the water or are near the water to indicate proper passage or safe passage for boats. Nothing is said in there about landmarks as navigation markers. There's not a word put in there about landmarks, which would seem to me to be proper navigation markers. For example, if you get into a small lake, you're not going to get lost. You can see the shore at all times, so you don't need a compass. But there are no navigation markers for you to see according to the proper definition. So this is very unclear, so I'm going to have to do some more research on that. Because I could just see this situation where all of a sudden you've got the cops there on the water and they're giving you a question about, do you have your compass, and ready to write the $200 ticket. It's just become ridiculous. This is going on a boat for fun, I'm starting to think that if you're a little child and you have an inflatable device from Canadian Tire and you just go on the water just to have fun, you'll end up coming back home to your parents with 3 $200 tickets because you didn't have the whistle, you didn't have the rope to throw, you didn't have the flashlight. It's just getting ridiculous. This is not seeming to me to be for your safety particularly, although there's a logic there that talks about having safety, but it seems to me more as a system for the government to make money. Anyways, that was that problem. The other problem is when I originally built the boat, the extended boat, I used 2 sheets of plywood, but in order to stay within the 2 sheets of plywood, I had to take a piece to extend the original sheet and turn it sideways. And I didn't think about it at the time, but that meant that the grain of the plywood now went up and down on the outside instead of lengthways. That means that literally the only lengthways fiber in the canoe, which is a lengthways device, is in the center of the plywood. And so it's not very much structural strength. Could easily break, and it's very bendable. I discovered the problem with it when I lifted the very long 15-foot piece I had glued on the other side of the garage here, and the glued on piece just bent like that. It was alarming bending. And then I realized I'd made another mistake here. Is it one that I can recover from? So last night, instead of gluing up the original pieces I planned to glue, I only glued up the one piece. Let me show you. So I put this on. You can see here the lengthways grain. I don't know if you can see there. That's a lengthwise grain piece. Oh, that's a tongue twister. And I got some pieces from the earlier canoe. Of course, I ripped it apart and used the pieces. And that's not the first piece I tried. I tried this piece here, but when I cut it out, I found it had a cut in it here, exactly what I did not want. So I had to cut another piece, and I glued it on so that there is, it's adding strength. Now the concern is that I am adding now too much strength, and it's going to be too rigid to bend properly. But I'm going to take my chances on that one. It's possible that the other ones, because I'm going to have to do this with every one of them. They're all going to be weak like this. And the only way to strengthen them is to do this. Now some of these pieces are at ends of the lengths, and I don't know exactly how I'm going to treat that. But at this point, this is my solution, and I've got to continue that. So it's going to take longer to do the glue ups. I just can't get away from it. So I'm going to get back at it and see what I can get accomplished today. So I've been using the roller so far, and today I decided to use a paintbrush because last night when I used the roller on the other piece, I found that the roller's made of foam and it absorbs a heck of a lot of the resin, and you just can't get it out of it. It just will not let it go. So you make resin, and then you put your roller in it and you roll it, and you pick it up and you go to apply it, and it's almost dry because it's all sopped up into the roller. And this is like $200 a gallon, and I'm not going to have it soaking up into a roller. So when I'm doing these small projects here, unless I want to use half my gallon just doing these little things, I figured I'd try to paintbrush and see how that goes. Well, the paintbrush drips more, I'll tell you that. I'll have to make sure I keep my tray over. My goal is to have it as thick as possible so that it fills all the cracks. There's no air pockets. I want to make sure that when I put weight down on it, it squeezes out everywhere. Now for this area, so far I like the paintbrush. Once again, I forgot, need to wear the gloves. that's going to be it for this part of my canoe building adventures. I want to thank you for joining in, and I want to remind you not to forget to subscribe to my channel. And hopefully we'll find a lot of progress in the next episode. See you soon.